the coronavirus is ravaging and pillaging across the world, across all nations, and we're only at the onset, the first chapter of this explosion of cases and death generated by this virus. And already the economic effects are being felt. In the past 2 weeks in the USA, I think there was a record 10 million jobless claims. That's like dwarfing any previous number. The economic impacts are already worse than the Great Depression, and we're just at the very beginning of the lockdowns and the viral spread and the disruptions to the supply chain around the world. So today we'll look at what I call the Great Collapse, what I think most people will end up agreeing to calling the Great Collapse. We are at the very initial stage of that Great Collapse. So what do we mean by a Great Collapse? Well, first, there's an escalating nomenclature of words that can be used to describe worsening economic situations. The least negative one is a correction. So when you have a market correction, maybe the housing is overvalued for a bit, so there'll be a correction of maybe 10% of the value. That's affecting only a single market. And an economy is built around a multitude of markets, and some clusters of markets are linked to a specific industry, like, for example, the financial markets. You have the bond market, the stock market, and the derivatives market, and maybe a couple other markets related to that field of financial products. And then you have like the dairy market, the corn market, the oil market, all the other broader economic markets, the service markets, service industries is dividing. So you have a multitude of markets, and some of them have corrections. But now the next level up from this is what we call a recession. So for an economic cycle, for the overall of all the markets in an economy, when you see a compression over 2 quarters in a row, that's considered to be theoretically a recession. Now, in the facts, a lot of the markets are disconnected from the everyday reality of most people who are not even invested in the stock market, for example. For them, it's really the bread and butter of having work and the daily commute to work, and they're buying their necessities and living their life. So they are not part of the stock market at all. So all of the financial markets can be kind of sustained artificially via injections of fake new money from the central banks. And so what we're seeing now in the stock markets is a lot of those injections are timed with some of these plays by the politics and the media saying that things are looking better for a while, and now they justify this. So you see this huge jump, like you had like 10 million jobless claims in the US, and yes, yet all the stock markets were up. So I mean, a lot of people are delusional, so they're controlled by that fake narrative, and they believe it when people tell them that things are looking up. And and the reality underneath is that they're just like pushing all of that new money into the system to keep it propped up, even though it's like a zombie at this point. And a lot of the businesses are collapsing. So we're what can we expect in terms of the businesses collapsing? We can expect something unprecedented, something much worse than even the next stage after a recession. So a recession, yeah, that's bad, and generally you don't want to be a worker during those time periods because it's harder to find work, stuff like that. But the next step up in terms of negative outlook is a depression. So that's where you go. The economy is tanking across the board. Pretty much all the markets are going down, and we had what was called the Great Depression in the late 20s. There was an overabundance of liquidity on the market, and then suddenly it just vanished, and so everything crashed, and it was a terrible depression where people couldn't find work, couldn't find food. Everything was like the economy was compacting really extremely. So there was a lot of suffering, and people lining up for food, for food banks, for work. And already we're seeing, if you dig for it, I mean, online in the mainstream news, you'll see the food banks are running low. The governments have to supply extra programs, emergency. People are starting to loot the groceries for food. I mean, we have examples in the past during the LA riots, like, or the Louisiana, the Katrina uh, hurricane, I mean, even police had to loot because they're cut off from everything. The stores are not really open or closed, so they're inside with looters taking stuff they need just for their immediate survival. And we see a situation now that where the risk factors are rapidly evolving towards such pressure on a large segments of the population that they will have no choice to resort to the. It will make a lot of criminals out of normal people. The current pressures that are being experienced by the economy, and this is just the beginning. So yeah, right now we could say we're already in a de facto depression. Although most people are living on their savings, most people think that the lockdowns will be released and things can go back to normal. I've seen credible stakeholders who speak of the global economy, and I'm not talking YouTube channels. I'm talking like people from Switzerland, from the World Labor Association and stuff like that. They have a very stark prognostic of saying that up to maybe over 1.25 billion people are about to lose their jobs, and like there's that number doesn't even make sense. Most people can't even compute it because you don't have half the world population working. This is like a huge part of the working population. In Canada, in Alberta, the premier just came up, says they expect maybe the jobless rate to go up to 25%. That's a crazily high number, right? Same thing with the USA. That's also what they expect. But the thing is, the humanists who control the media and the body politics across the world, and especially the West for now, since the 90s, they've changed the way they calculate the jobs rate, meaning that they exclude people who were still looking for work but couldn't find any. So these became like after a while, after a few weeks, they're no longer counted. So right now we're starting at the jobless rate of around 5% in North America. It's already rising. But if you look at the website shadowstats.com, like they use the classical method for joblessness, and they estimate that the USA is more like around 21% joblessness already right now. So if the numbers are going to jump to 25 by the official numbers, by the new modern numbers, that means that the actual classical jobless rate is going to hit 50%. So that's like a death knell for any economy, and that's what I think is going to happen. Is not only is this like a depression, but you won't have the economy picking back up after. The economy is kind of gone for good after that, and it will not be like a V shape where it can bounce back. I mean, they will try it, of course. Well, I'm not saying that it will completely happen out of control, and they will come up with any kind of new measures to try to prevent what I'm describing from fully happening. And of course, I support any working initiative that can help with that. I think one of the main ones that's really required with high urgency is universal basic income. And I know it's a costly affair, and most countries don't know how to manage it, but it would eliminate a lot of the government bureaucracy and replace it with direct deposit in people's accounts. Because let's face it, human beings are the sentient life force, the basic dignity, the basic value and meaning to life on earth. It comes from human beings. And I think it would be good a bottom-up approach where currency just emanates out of people as a bottom line so that people can afford the basic necessities of having a place to live and eat and educate. And then if you want to go over the top and be creative, constructive, then you can bring even more revenue to yourself and experience more interesting things, and then see how we can broaden this within the sovereign confines of consent, mutual consent, to broader regions of the world progressively. So yeah, I think we're there. If they don't do that, it's going to be a terrible mess with tons of people suffering from massive famines everywhere. So that's why we're talking about a collapse at this point. Now, a collapse is terrible, right? Because you don't get back up from a collapse. It's like you're KO on the ground. You're not gonna go back up and start fighting again. And I think this is where the world is at right now, a global collapse. Sure, some countries will not collapse. They will manage to keep their thing up because they've been able to keep the virus out. And there are some radical measures you can take, like cutting off any foreigners from coming into your country. And those that do come have to stay in quarantine for like up to 40 days, because let's face it, in the Middle Ages, they called it a quarantine because it's the Italian for 40. Like in French, quarantaine, it's not 2 weeks, not 3 weeks, it's 40. We should be 40 days. I think they were onto something. I think we should restore that. so that if you want to travel, it wouldn't be short term like tourism. Like that industry is gone and not coming back anytime soon. I think you will, maybe if a country is securing itself, it's got the virus completely contained, eliminated, and it's quarantining anybody that comes in, and they're just coming in for the long term. Okay, and then you can have like internal domestic tourism again, stuff like that. I'm not saying it's the end of the world. I'm saying it's the end of the modern world as we knew it. So me, I'm a classical person. I've never been quite a friend of modernity. I think modernity is kind of the humanist version of civilization. I think it's been built on inequities. I think it's been abusing the masses for a long time. It's injustices against many, many individuals, countless places, countless times throughout the whole era, which started like with the French Revolution, basically. Uh, yeah, I think there's a lot of good that happened in the world during those centuries, but overall, that whole system is brought crashing down. It was already on the verge of crashing down. The world was already drowning in debt even before this accidental bioweapons leak from the communist regime happened. I think I mean, people in Taiwan, they call it the Wuhan virus, just to make it clear where it came from, and there's some people calling it the CCP virus. I think these are really anti-communist people that know firsthand how evil that the people in that regime are towards other humans, and they're really anti-mankind. The way they behave is completely appalling, and I think they will have to answer for their assaults against all of mankind. It cannot be accepted anymore. I think this veneer of tolerance is fading now, and with everything that's happening, we'll have broader destabilization. As I mentioned before, that regime, they're 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 scary. Who knows what they are willing to do to stay in power, no matter what. I think they already view us as enemies. I think from the point of view of the CCP, they really hate anybody who's not part of the CCP, and they're out to kind of destroy everybody else and make themselves the top, or lose everything while trying. That seems to be their mentality, and it's very disgusting to have people think like that, being such betrayers of mankind right now. I mean, I think we could do without, considering all the damage that already exists. But I think there's inevitably going to be wars coming around it, and wars for resources. So because the resources are becoming very limited already, a lot of countries are closing their doors to exports. In China, we have massive waves of panic buying of long-term um, commodities, like long-term non-perishable foods and oil and oats and rice, because they know that it's going to run out. So if they're smart not to trust the government and just to stock up for as long as they can. I think this approach should be replicated, emulated by other people in other countries as well, whenever possible. I mean, these staples don't really cost a lot right now, so it's better to get your hands on them while they're available. And because we're talking about a collapse, and a collapse means that with all the institutions that we came to depend upon will soon no longer be functioning properly. And in previous pandemics, like during the Roman times, the Roman Empire, and the Greek societies, they had pandemics as well. And the common theme is, once the pandemic is disrupting enough to the economy, people stop obeying the law. That means they stop not stealing stuff because they prefer to survive than not steal. Even people who are okay, self-sufficient, they stop paying taxes because they want to keep the liquidity in their pockets. They want to be able to sustain themselves for as long as possible. So the very foundation of the legal system starts eroding and falling apart. And of course, that's where I want to get to, is the Roman Empire. The Western Roman Empire suffered a collapse. Rome was pillaged by barbarians, and one time too many, and it couldn't sustain itself after that. There were too many intestine wars, fratricidal civil wars that kind of weakened the empire from within, and eventually it just collapsed. And the collapse happened over a long period of time, and the central power really could no longer function, and really what spelled the end of the Roman Empire was when the Roman legions stopped receiving their payments from Rome. And then everybody, a light bulb went on and said, oh my God, this is really over. So, what I mean by a great collapse, I mean a collapse that's going to be bigger than what happened with the Roman Empire collapse, because it's not going to be just the Roman Empire part of the world. It won't be just Europe and the Mediterranean area. I think it's going to be global, and with some exceptions. Uh, and this general collapse will be known by all future generations as the Great Collapse, because nothing before or after will come close to it in terms of how bad things got and how fast things got so bad. So that's really, like, I think I'm probably the most negative person right now on the internet to say something like this. I don't think I would venture such very ambitious assertions unless I was very confident about what I'm saying. I think my analysis is supported by facts on the ground from multiple sources, from multiple groups that have diverging interests. I think a lot of people are able to perceive this. And so when we talk about a great collapse of modern civilization, we can imagine the immense suffering and destabilization that will affect the coming period of the next few years and perhaps the next decade. So this is compounded by the fact that we have huge agricultural disruptions to the agricultural production that the media has been hiding, but it's been happening for the past few years. The food production has been collapsing in many instances in many types of produce. They haven't been able to get their output, and now they can't even bring it to market anymore. So food insecurity rising to a point where we're going back to a sustenance economy, and we need self-reliance to pick up during that phase of what's coming. So it's better to get ready now. So if you want to find like seeds that can reproduce themselves, and then use that and start your garden, start your microgreens. So there will be some level of civilization subsisting throughout that phase, because not all parts of government will collapse. Some parts will continue to function. The critical parts might be continuing to provide the internet, energy, water to people. That shouldn't be too hard. And I think we need just the old mentality of the humanist, modernist mentality of you need to become an expert because before you can do something. That has to be flushed down the toilet, and we need to go back to a more like guild-like approach where there's a mentor, somebody who knows how to do something. He takes on an assistant, a helper, and he teaches that person while that person supports the activities of the knowledgeable expert, so that knowledge can propagate that way and things can continue to happen without having to wait for some kind of degree from an institution financed by a foundation with all of their specific agendas that will get most people nowhere. No, we need to transmit knowledge across us at the individual immediate level, and that needs to start happening right now if we are to make it through this until a new stable form of civilization takes hold. And with all the innovation and the new technology that's coming in, it's going to be super interesting how fast and how strong civilization can make a comeback. And the new civilization, the next civilization, will be astonishing in so many ways. So it's totally worthwhile to make it through all of this. Okay, so if that's the light at the end of the tunnel, it's just, I hope we get to see what it's like after. I hope we get to be part of those that build the next generation of human civilization, because really we're going to be able to make something amazing out of this mess. And it will just take time, and it will just be extremely painful to get there. So most people who aren't prepared, who didn't plan, who didn't dare to look reality in the face and say, you know what, I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to take immediate actions for myself, my family, my friends, where possible. It's a consent-based approach. We can't force people to reckon with reality as we see it ourselves. Everybody, we have to respect that there's a multitude of views out there, but I think I have the view that's closest, most anchored towards the objective reality that exists independently of our well wishes and hopes. Because right now there's a lot of people who just want to believe that everything's going to stay the way it is because the alternative is really not cool. And so that's not really a rational, reasonable, sound way for human minds to function. I hope that you can join me among those who are able to calmly assess pragmatically the facts as they emerge and deal with it in their own immediacy so that we're not affected overly by what's happening. We're able to kind of manage it and make it through to the other side so that we'll be able to witness and partake and participate in that next civilization, which is going to be extremely different from everything we've seen thus far. It's going to be a major leap forward, like a century forward in terms of technology advancement. And it's going to be extremely interesting. And I want to give people hope. I'm here to comfort people. And also, I'm almost done talking about the coronavirus, even though it's going to be with us for like a decade. I maybe, if on demand, do something more, or if I have a good idea that needs to be brought forward. But I think I laid the groundwork here to help everyone make it through this. Uh, the rest you can figure out on your own, I think. But I will make one more video, and one last video is going to be about the next civilization. And this is just to show you the real hope that I have for the tomorrow that's coming. And so, yeah, and after that, after I make that video, I can get back to the core topics that are history, religion, polemics, politics, you name it. I've got a bunch of stuff I wish to share. Maybe that won't interest many of you. Maybe that's not what you came here for. I respect that. I hope that my coronavirus videos were helpful. I hope that you're able to find your peace and your happiness elsewhere. If not, well, stick around. I'll be making more videos indefinitely, and I will accelerate my pace once I get the hang of it. So yeah, that's it for now. So thank you for viewing this video. Thank you for your time. Thank you for taking the time to like this video, to share it with your friends, people you think might be interested. This helps me. So yeah, I welcome any help, obviously. So you can subscribe. You can go on Patreon if you want to ask me a question for me to make a specific video about a specific topic. And then that's it. So take care. Have a good one and good luck.